Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We welcome you here today for your appearance for the commission, and you can proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you, Justice Wiggins. Good afternoon. My name is Angie Schutz. It is a pleasure to be here this afternoon. First of all, I want to thank you all for your time on this commission and for the time to present my credentials and qualifications to you. Having sat on the 5C Commission, I know how important this work is and how much time you have devoted to this process, so thank you very much. In filling out this application, it was actually interesting to me to sit at this point of my career and have this opportunity of self-reflection. And I think it's best today to talk about a little bit about what brought me here today, and then for me to talk with you about how I see my future on the Iowa Supreme Court. I was born and raised in Grinnell, Iowa. I don't come from a professional family. My father was a police officer. My mother, because of my father's hours, stayed home with us. And I'm the middle child. I have an older brother and a younger sister. I'm the second person in my entire family to graduate from college. The first was my older brother, and he beat me by a day. But to my parents, education was critical, and it was very important. And I think that they would say that their greatest accomplishment was the fact that all three of us have college degrees. I was raised, however, with a commitment to public service. And having a father as a police officer who then served 20 years on the Poweshiek County, or serving Poweshiek County in a variety of areas, it was really important to us to be public servants. And that has been instilled in both my brother and my sister and myself. My brother served 20 years in the military, serving 3 tours in Iraq. My sister has taught 5th grade for 25 years. And then there was me, who went to law school. There were some things in reviewing my application that really stood out to me and what has led me to this point. And first of all, it was my opportunity to go to Luther College. It was a great place for me to grow up, a great place for me to become educated. And there were a lot of people there at Luther College who saw things in me that I did not see in myself. I went to Luther College primarily to play softball. And I played 4 years of college softball for a great coach. But I was a mediocre player at best, quite frankly. And in my senior year, I was voted a co-captain. And again, this was somebody who was a mediocre player at best. But my teammates and my coach saw something in me that I had not seen in myself. The second was the opportunity to belong to a service organization, Alpha Phi Omega. And at Luther, that was one of the largest organizations on campus. It had several hundred members. And in my sophomore year, I had someone who encouraged me to run for a leadership position. And again, that was not something that was on my radar screen, and somebody else saw something in me that was not necessarily something I saw in myself. And I eventually was elected to president. I served that organization for 3 years in leadership roles. And for that work, I was awarded at my college graduation the Jensen Medal. In 1993, that was the first year for that medal. And it was to recognize the outstanding senior who exemplified the spirit of service to the college. And it, again, was something that someone saw something in me that I didn't see in myself at the time. So from Luther College, I went to Drake Law School. And there were 3 things that happened to me while I was at Drake. The first is I met Maureen Tobin, who is one of my longtime law partners, is a mentor and my friend. And I met her in the first year of my first year of law school, in second semester. And the reason I met Maureen was that her nanny and my younger sister were really good friends. And Tracy called me and said, Maureen and Terry would like for you to come over for dinner. And being the poor law student that I was, I readily accepted. And I went over and had dinner with them. And at the end of the dinner, Maureen said to me, are you looking for a summer job? To which I said yes, because I'm a poor law student. So I was fortunate enough to go and interview at Whitfield & Eddy, and I was offered a position as a law clerk there. and I clerked there for 2 years while I was in law school. The second was I got to intern at Iowa Legal Aid, and I got to second chair a 5-day divorce and custody trial. And that was my first exposure to family law, because I had gone to law school thinking that I was going to become a county attorney, not because that was what my father thought I should do. But quite frankly, the exposure to family law was something that really the bug bit me in the first semester of my third year. And I feel very fortunate that I was exposed to that. It's also the place I met my husband. He is also a lawyer. Peter Katundu and I will have celebrated 19 years of marriage in October, and we are in the midst of raising 2 teenage daughters who will be in 7th and 9th grade at the Des Moines Public Schools this fall. So I then, after I graduated from law school, I was offered a position at Whitfield & Eddy, and I started there as a lawyer in June of 1994. So it is the only job I've ever had as an adult. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to practice law there, because I have many great mentors, friends, colleagues. And so this application for this position was well thought out, because I feel like I've had the best job for the last 22 years. My practice is focused pretty much on family law. And that means that my daily life, or my daily professional life, touches individuals, families, and I have seen where the court system makes some of the most important decisions that it can make. That also means, by practicing family law, that I've had a lot of exposure to a lot of different areas, including probate, tax, real estate, corporations. I had to learn how to read a tax return. I have to understand how my client's small business may be divided, or how that's going to be affected. And so family law touches a lot of different areas. I also have to sometimes do administrative work, meaning that I have to do the administrative process, for example, for setting up child support. So I've had exposure with that as well. But most of all, I see how the finality of decisions affects my clients' day-to-day lives. I mean, these are some of the most important decisions that or the most important issues my clients are entrusting to me are their money and their children. And so that weighs on me each and every day when I go to work. When I started at Whitfield, there were about 4 lawyers who did family law, a little part-time. Whitfield did some family law. We didn't do a lot. And I really, because I raised my hand and said I am willing to do family law, feel very proud that we have built that practice up at the Whitfield firm. And I would say that probably 25% of our practice, or our billables now, are in family law, and that there are 7 of us who practice family law pretty much on a full-time basis. The other thing about the practice of family law, or me as an individual practicing family law, is I always strove to be the best. 3 years ago, I became a member of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. And that was something I didn't have to do. It didn't mean I could do anything different. It wasn't an extra license. It was just a recognition that I was the best, one of the best family law lawyers in the country. And that was really important to me. It meant that I had to fill out an application, quite frankly, somewhat like filling out the application to the Supreme Court. It was about a 10-page application, including listing all of the cases I tried in the last 5 years, and I had to list all the appeals I've handled. I had to list all the evidentiary hearings I had. I had to give the names of 5 judges for them to contact. And then once I got the application, then I had to take an exam. And the exam covered everything from tax to probate to the Hague Convention. And so this was something that really was very important for me to do. And then once I got the exam completed and I passed the exam, I had to do a personal interview with the board. And so again, it was very important for me to be able to do that. And I feel very fortunate that I've been a member of that organization for the last 3 years. As a part of my practice in family law, I also became a mediator. And I did that about 15 years ago. And I have mediated family law cases in addition to representing individuals. And I always say that I'm not sure I have become a better mediator in the 15 years, but I've become a better lawyer, because I have been able to witness some really, really good lawyers practice law and, as I say all the time, steal from them. And I think that those mediation skills are really important, especially when you talk about a position on the Supreme Court, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. The other thing I did at Whitfield is that I became a leader in my firm. And when you practice with a larger firm, we have management structures. And so I have served my firm by being in charge of our associates, meaning that I provide mentorship and training to them. I also have sat, and I'm currently sitting on our professional recruitment committee, which means that we're in charge of hiring all the law clerks, the legal assistants, the associates, and that means interviewing them and vetting them for positions. And I've also served on our firm's executive committee, and that is a 6-year term. It meant that I had to lead lawyers that I had known since I was 23 years old, and they were significantly older than I was and a lot more experienced, but I had to find a way in which to lead them. I feel like I led by building consensus among our partners, and as you can imagine, with 45 lawyers, we'll have 45 opinions. And getting everyone to agree on something, sometimes I would say that world peace was easier, but we did it, and I felt like I was very blessed to be able to serve my firm in that capacity. The other thing about serving on the executive committee was that meant that I was responsible for a lot of the day-to-day management, or that as part of the team that was responsible for the day-to-day management. And while there was some compensation for that role, there wasn't a lot of compensation. And so, but I felt it was critical and very important that I serve the firm in that way. I have practiced law with a commitment to public service. I say often that I was given a gift when I became a lawyer. And I don't say that in a very Pollyanna fashion. I really, truly mean it. And that my commitment to public service has played out the last 22 years by serving on various bar committees, by serving on different boards. I am very proud of the number of pro bono cases that I have had over the years, and all of the lawyers, or all the clients I've been able to serve at no charge. I've not just served them as a lawyer, but also as a mediator. And in the last, I would say, 5 years, I've also taken it upon myself to help train other lawyers to do pro bono cases. For example, we have a corporate client at my firm that the general counsel said, we'd like to be able to do some pro bono work. And we'll take some no asset, no kid divorces, but we need some help. And so I went out and I trained them. I spent an afternoon training a bunch of lawyers, some corporate lawyers, to do pro bono divorces. And I also said, call me anytime if you have a question or a concern. Because again, the more lawyers we can get into the pool of providing pro bono services, the better off we're all going to be. The other thing I have done is, and I've demonstrated and I guess put out in my application, is the number of speaking engagements I've had or speaking opportunities. And I feel like that is important as far as the practice of law and to be able to provide CLE opportunities. The other thing is it, quite frankly, made me a better lawyer because I had to learn everything that I was going to say and be able to answer any question that anyone was going to ask me. So I guess that leads to the second part of this, and that is, with the self-reflection, is why the Supreme Court, and more importantly, why Angie Schutz. So, and number one, I would say it is my experience in family law. I cited in my application materials, and this is from the Supreme Court website, the number of family law cases that are filed in the state of Iowa. It is significant. And I think it would be very important to have somebody on the Iowa Supreme Court with that type of experience with those types of cases. And while I understand that the Supreme Court doesn't take many family law appeals, they take a handful each year, they still have the administrative side to decide how family law cases are going to be processed. You know, will we have an expedited trial system like we do for civil cases? At what point in time will we maybe require mediation in family law cases? I think it would be very important to have somebody with that type of experience and knowledge on the Supreme Court. The other thing is, because I have done family law, I've settled a lot of cases, don't get me wrong, but I've tried a lot. And quite frankly, one of the reasons I started doing family law when I was a baby lawyer was that it allowed me to have my own cases in a big firm, and it allowed me to try a lot of cases. And I have tried a lot of cases in the last 22 years. Most of them have been bench trials, but it meant that I tried cases in a lot of different judicial districts to a lot of different judges. In putting my application materials together, I thought about, I've tried cases in 6 of the 8 judicial districts. I've had cases in all 8 judicial districts. The 7th and the 1st, I have not tried a case in because I've settled them. But I've tried cases to a lot of different judges. And again, I think that that experience would be critical to the Iowa Supreme Court. Just the nature of family law means that I understand the impact courts have on individual families and on individuals. I understand that, when a judge decides whether or not my client's going to retain custody or not is a really important and critical decision. It also impacts them financially. I say all the time to my partners, the next time your client has a $3 million judgment, let me call them. But you have to call my client if they've lost custody of their children. And they've never taken me up on it. So the other thing I would bring to the Supreme Court is my experience as a mediator. And I think, again, writing opinions for the court, you're writing opinions for the court, not as an individual judge. And I think that ability to build consensus and to see a lot of different sides and to see where we can meet in the middle, I think would be very important to this position. I also have a lot of experience in the administrative issues that come before the court. Over my 22 years, I served 6 years on the Grievance Commission, which meant that I was part of the body that heard disciplinary cases against lawyers. It also meant that I had to help in writing those opinions or those decisions that would ultimately get reviewed by the Iowa Supreme Court. And also that it just also meant that I was rendering judgment on my colleagues, because they're all lawyers that come before us. The second is that I've served on the Family Law Case Processing Task Force. And that task force was tasked, for lack of a better word, to look at family law cases and how we are processing those in the state of Iowa. And I was very fortunate to be a part of that task force and have really enjoyed my service on that. And we made some recommendations to the Iowa Supreme Court that then the Iowa Supreme Court has taken under advisement. And then finally, I have served as the co-chair, or the vice chair of the Access to Justice Commission. And this was something that was created 2 years ago by a vote of the Iowa State Bar Association as a recommendation to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court took that recommendation and created the commission. And I have served as vice chair to Justice Apple. We have just finished our 2nd year of that commission. We had a report at the end of our 1st year. We'll have another report coming out here in July. And our job is to make recommendations to the Iowa Supreme Court as to how we can ensure access to justice for all Iowans. And I have been very honored to serve on that task force. In addition to serving on that task force, I also sit on 2 of the work groups. We have 7 work groups, one that focuses just on veterans issues, one that focuses on case processing. We have rural access, we have language access, we have corporate involvement, we have pro bono efforts, and we have public relations. And I have sat on the veterans work group, and I've also sat on the corporate work group. And again, how do we involve those corporate lawyers in pro bono efforts? And then finally, I would say that what I would bring to the Iowa Supreme Court is a commitment to civility, to access to justice, and a commitment to public service. I do think, for better or for worse, this Iowa Supreme Court is the face of the judicial branch. And I think that is a very important role that the court has. And I would be honored to be a part of that face. And again, with my commitment to civility and access to justice, I think would be those qualities would really serve this court well. I have never been a judge. I have sat on the 5C Judicial Nominating Commission, which means I have thought a lot about what makes a good judge. And I have asked applicants, somewhat sitting in my seat, how they have thought about applying and what they would bring to the table. And quite frankly, I always ask them what they have done to research about what this position would mean to them and what this position would mean for their lives. And I really have come to this conclusion that I think that a good judge has a good temperament, intellect, and I think intellect is a lot of different things, brings a sense of fairness, and quite frankly, leadership and collaboration. And I feel like I have all of those qualities. So again, I thank you very much for your time today. I would welcome any questions that the commission would have.
Okay, we don't have very much time for questions, so
Okay.
we will start with John and go around that way.
I have a quick question for
Sure.
you. With your expertise in family law, do you see the current system for handling those cases as adequate? And if not, what improvements do you think it requires or needs?
Well, I don't have very much time, so I think we do. It is our only system that we have, but I do think that there are some things that we can do to ensure that our families are treated fairly, and more importantly, that we do a better job about treating them. I think it's really difficult with a family to say to parents, we want you to go in as litigants and fight against each other, and then, oh, by the way, we want you to co-parent your children. And so if we could do something more within the system to ensure that that's not the take that they give. One of the things I think that's come out of the Family Law Task Force is the idea of expedited family law trials, meaning that people agree that they'll get into the system on a shorter time frame. The rules of evidence are lax a little bit, the rules of civil procedure are lax a little bit, but they get a quicker decision. And I know that there's a pilot program in, for example, in the 7th Judicial District that's going on right now. They've done 1 year of that. I think the second year is coming up. So those are the types of things I think are really important. The other thing is just, and I know that this has been somewhat controversial at times, is just saying that we want parents to try to work it out before they go to trial. And so requiring mediation before trial, I think, is also really important. You're welcome. Thank you.
Anybody over on any questions at all? I don't mean to cut people off, but Dr. Taylor?
I do. I just want to ask. I know we don't have a lot of time here, but we talked last night. I was pretty impressed with your community involvement. You didn't really highlight it here. Can you tell us a little bit about the community involvement you've had and how it focuses in on access to justice, which is, you and I talked, is a big issue for me.
Sure. Thank you. Yes. First of all, I have been a volunteer. I've been provided volunteer or pro bono services since I graduated from law school. I have served as the president of the Polk County Bar VLP. I have served as the chair of the Iowa State Bar Association Access to Justice Committee, and now with the work on the Access to Justice Commission.
I was more interested in other community activities. I thought you got an award recently in the last few months.
Yes. So first of all, I was recognized by the Iowa Supreme Court as an award winner for the Voice of Justice, and that meant that each justice got to choose somebody that they wanted to recognize. I was very honored to be chosen by Justice Apple and recognized for, again, my work, just public service, access to justice. I think my application is pretty lengthy as it relates to all of my involvement in the bar activities and in just the community as a whole. So, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm not answering your question.
I thought you got another award from the community.
Oh, sure. I was recognized also by the Polk County Women Attorneys. I was given the Willie Glanton Stevenson Award, and that was, again, something that was awarded this spring, and I was very honored. And that is to recognize they choose somebody who they feel exemplifies that commitment to public service and rising in Ms. Stevens' real push to raise other people up. And I feel like my work with, for example, my pro bono clients has really done that. But also just as a, I guess, within the community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Ms. Schutz, we're out of time, so I appreciate you coming here today, and I wish you the best of luck.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.